The Venezuelan Foreign Minister has rejected the decision of the International Court of Justice regarding the border dispute with the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Hundreds of protesters joined a torch-lit march in the French capital Paris on Friday evening to call on authorities to grant legal status to all undocumented workers. The United Nations has launched an appeal for $254 million to provide urgently needed assistance to more than 1.1 million people affected by violence, conflict and insecurity in Mozambique. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jose Arriaza, speaking on behalf of the national government and the Venezuelan people, rejected the decision of the International Court of Justice regarding the dispute over the Essequibo territory.
Venezuela rejects the infamous decision of the International Court of Justice. Contrary to the spirit of 1966 Geneva Agreement, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela has learned of the ruling of the International Court of Justice, read at the hearing by video conference today, December 18, 2020, in relation to the unilateral claim filed by the Cooperative Republic of Guyana against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela on the validity of the 1899 arbitral award.
And the Venezuelan Foreign Minister also urged the authorities of Guyana to respect the Geneva Agreement, signed in 1966, that urges the parties to peacefully resolve the border dispute.
Finally, Venezuela reiterates its call for this dispute to be handled in an amicable manner and proposes the initiation of direct negotiations with the Cooperative Republic of Guyana in accordance with international law and on the basis of the 1966 Geneva Agreement that mandates both parties to resolve this dispute in a peaceful manner.
This Friday, journalist and political leader Jose Vicente Rangel died in the Venezuelan capital at the age of 91. Jose Vicente Rangel was a lawyer and journalist and developed an extensive political career from the second half of the 20th century. He was a presidential candidate in the 1973, 1978 and 1983 elections, and during the administration of President Hugo Chavez, he served as defense minister, foreign minister and executive vice president. In the field of journalism, he established a solid career in the written press, radio and television, for which he was distinguished with the National Journalism Prize. He also authored several books on the history of human rights. This Friday in Bolivia, the first meeting of the peoples and organizations of Abya Yala, which sees the attendance of social movements and unions from across the continent, began. The meetings being held in the presence of Bolivian President Luis Arce, former President and Indigenous leader Evo Morales, and representatives of Indigenous and rural communities, and will analyze a political agenda for the peoples based on the construction of a plurinational America through the strengthening of the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, the recovery of the Union of South American nations, the Bolivarian Alternative for the Peoples of Our America, People's Trade Treaty, and the consolidation of the Union of Workers of the Americas. The agenda includes a debate on strategies in the struggle against colonialism and in favour of equality and respect for the diversity of peoples. And former Bolivian President Evo Morales highlighted that indigenous peoples are promoting constituent assemblies with the aim of creating a new constitutional framework based on plurinational states.
Indigenous peoples are promoting a process of change through the constituent assemblies for a new constitutional and institutional design to shape plurinational states that express the diversity of cultural identities, the peaceful coexistence of all beings with Mother Earth, giving reconstruction of ancestral wisdom in the culture of peace.
Guatemala's executive office has confirmed that since last week, all government officials have made their positions available to the President, Alejandro Giammattei, for him to put together a new cabinet. The Ministries of Social Development and Social Communication confirmed that this is a normal process under any presidential mandate. Every year, the President must ratify the ministerial portfolios or change some of them according to the needs of the state. So far, it's not been announced which, if any, ministers will be changed, nor has it been confirmed that any formal resignation has been accepted. President Giammattei must make the announcements between late December and early January 2021. The country is in the midst of a serious political, social and governance crisis, with the normal move taking on extra significance. The Association of the Indigenous Peoples of Brazil revealed this Thursday the number of infections and fatalities caused by COVID-19 in the communities of the Brazilian Amazon. The association, which works with official data from the Special Secretariat for Indigenous Health in collaboration with the National Committee for Indigenous Life and Memory, reported that to date 42,192 indigenous people have been infected and 161 are suffering the wider effects of the pandemic. Meanwhile, according to the association, there have been 894 COVID-19 related deaths in indigenous communities. In addition to COVID-19, the indigenous peoples of the Brazilian Amazon have suffered state negligence and attacks by the government of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro. The Mexican government announced a 15% increase in the minimum wage in the midst of the health and economic crisis caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Our correspondent Eduardo Martinez has the story.
From the northern state of Sonora, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador celebrated the 15% increase in the minimum wage announced by the commission that gathers government's representative workers and employers sectors. This last only proposed 10%.
On this occasion, there was no consensus among the three parties. However, there were not many differences, but an offer of an increase was made by the business sector, and the members of the commission considered that it wasn't enough.
The president expressed disagreement with the criticism coming from the businessmen that exaggerate about the possible consequences that the increase could have. They argued that up to 7,000 companies could go bankrupt in the next 3 months.
Workers are going to have an increase that on a global scale is still embarrassing. How are we going to be in the G20 group of the richest countries in the world, and we are going to be ranked 76 in terms of payments of wages?
During the governments of the so-called neoliberal period, the president explained the purchasing power of the minimum wage fell by 75%. This situation has repercussions on the economy of families that, according to merchants like Carmen, already bought little, and now with the pandemic their sales have plummeted by up to 60%.
I realize that people don't have money. They ask for one thing and they say it expensive. It's the least. Yes, I can't sell any cheaper because I already have low prices.
The Economic Commission for the Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, highlighted in its latest report that the Mexican economy will be one of the most affected at the end of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mexico's economic activity recovery is around 3.8%. Obviously, a first projection and the drop by 2020 will be minus 9%.
This increase is expected by 2021, but it would barely be enough to compensate for a third of the decrease caused by the confinement and the costs associated with the presence of SARS-CoV-2 in the world. In general, the region will take up to 10 years to recover conditions similar to those it had before the health emergency.
Hundreds of protesters joined a torch-lit march in the French capital Paris on Friday evening to call on authorities to grant legal status to all undocumented workers.
We came here to support undocumented migrants. We came as supporters while there are a lot of people who are undocumented. In France, there are more than 6 million people who are undocumented. So we came for the regularization of all undocumented migrants, for the closure of detention centers, as well as housing for all.
Undocumented migrants were in the second line in the fight against the COVID. Undocumented migrants were the delivery men, the garbage collector, the cleaning women, the cleaning men. They were undocumented migrants too, the cashiers. So we are asking, because of all this, that we be granted our rights to settle and to circulate.
The United States Energy Department is the latest agency to confirm it was breached in what's been described as the worst ever hack on the US government. The department is responsible for managing US nuclear weapons, but said the arsenal security had not been compromised. Tech giant Microsoft also said on Thursday that it had found malicious software in its systems. The US Treasury and Commerce Departments are among the other targets of the sophisticated months-long breach, which was first acknowledged by officials on Sunday. President Donald Trump is yet to comment on the cyberattacks. Meanwhile, US President-elect Joe Biden has vowed to make cybersecurity a top priority of his administration. The World Health Organization Director General announced on Friday that the agency's program to secure COVID-19 vaccines for all countries in need had gained access to nearly 2 billion doses of several promising vaccine candidates.
We're proud to announce that COVAX has secured to access almost 2 billion doses of several promising vaccine candidates. These unprecedented agreements mean that all 190 countries and economies participating in COVAX will be able to access vaccines to protect vulnerable groups in their populations during the first half of next year. This is fantastic news and a milestone in global health.
Spain will begin immunising its population against the coronavirus on December 27th, a day after it receives the first doses of a vaccine, according to its health minister.
We continue thinking that around May-June we will have between 15 and 20 million Spanish citizens vaccinated, immunized, and we will give more information as soon as we have more details about the exact amounts we will receive and when of the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine and Moderna vaccine. We will need to continue with the measures which are in some cases drastic. We know that, but it is absolutely essential to support them and follow them strictly because we see the instability of this virus and how the situation can change in a few hours.
The Greek Prime Minister announced on Friday that the first batch of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine is expected to arrive in Greece on December 26, and the country will roll out vaccinations the day after.
According to the latest information from the European Medicines Agency, the approval of the first vaccine is expected to be for the Pfizer vaccine on December 22nd. Distribution in Europe is expected to begin immediately after. We believe that the first batch of vaccines will be in our country on December 26th, and from December 27th we will be able to have the first vaccinations in 5 hospitals in Athens and immediately after in Thessaloniki. Of course, we should be aware that only when we reach about 70% of vaccinated people amongst the Greek population, we will be able to safely say that the pandemic is behind us. As you know, we have already secured the safe transportation and storage conditions and the way to quickly transport the vaccine to the 1,018 vaccination centers that have been organized in every corner of the country.
Slovakia's Prime Minister Igor Matovic has become the second leader of a European Union country to test positive for the coronavirus in the past 2 days. Friday's announcement came a day after French President Emmanuel Macron also tested positive on Thursday. Both leaders attended an EU summit in Brussels last week. The Prime Minister's office said Matovic was tested on Thursday and has cancelled his entire work agenda. Members of his coalition government are self-isolating after he led the last government session on Wednesday. Slovakia is imposing a round-the-clock curfew on Saturday following a recent surge of new coronavirus infections. The government has urged people to isolate for at least 7 days or get tested before they see their relatives during the Christmas holidays. The Swiss government has ordered the closure of restaurants, bars, cultural venues and sports facilities from next week because of a surging number of coronavirus cases. The health minister said the new restrictions, which come into effect on Tuesday, are necessary as the situation in health facilities is not tenable in the long term. The federal government left it to Switzerland's 26 cantons to decide whether to close skiing facilities. Daily new cases in Switzerland have risen over the past 2 weeks from 43 cases per 100,000 people on December 3rd up to 50 on Thursday. So far, the nation registers nearly 404,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 6,500 deaths.
Starting next Tuesday, we are going to activate the next step with thorough measures, which are necessary to take today, to take back control of this situation. The closure of restaurants, there will be exceptions for hotels, takeaway, school cafeterias and business cafeterias. Also the closing of sport facilities with some exceptions as well. Obviously, all this will be implemented all across the country. Restaurants will also be closing ski stations. Shops will have to close at 7 p.m. and must remain closed on Sundays. And talking about ski stations, it's up the canton's responsibilities on whether to open or not the ski lifts. But we are telling them clearly to think about it carefully. Think carefully because hospitals are full and putting a lot of people on snow slopes can lead to an increase in accidents and we need to be very careful. This is a very important responsibility for Canton.
The United Nations and partners this Friday launched an appeal for $254 million to provide urgently needed assistance and protection to more than 1.1 million people affected by violence, conflict and insecurity in Mozambique's Cabo Delgado area and neighbouring provinces.
The crisis in Cabo Delgado rapidly escalated in 2020, with attacks and fighting forcing tens of thousands of people from their homes every month. Nearly 530,000 people are now internally displaced in Cabo Delgado, Nampula and Niassa, almost 5 times the number registered some 9 months ago in March. People fleeing violence in Cabo Delgado have been exposed to severe violations and abuses, and we are especially concerned for the plight of children and women. Women and girls are at risk of abduction, gender-based violence and exploitation, while boys are at risk of being killed or recruited by armed groups.
India's Prime Minister said on Friday his government is willing to address the concerns of tens of thousands of rural workers who are blocking key highways in a protest against new agricultural laws, but rejected their demand that the legislation be repealed. Prime Minister Narendra Modi accused opposition parties of spreading fear that the 3 laws approved by Parliament in September would drive down crop prices and lead to farmers' exploitation by big corporations. Protest leaders have rejected the government's offer to amend some contentious provisions of the laws. Rural workers fear the government will stop buying grain at minimum guaranteed prices, meaning corporations will then push prices down, heavily impacting on their livelihoods.
With folded hands, I want to tell all the political parties, you keep all the credit. I give credit to all your old manifestos. I don't want any credit. I want to make farmers' lives simpler. I want prosperity for them. Want the modernization of farming system. Please stop misleading the farmers. Stop confusing them. These laws were not brought in overnight. In the past 22 years, every government state has discussed this in detail. Farmer groups, agricultural experts, economists, scientists, and progressive farmers have called for reforms. Farmers should ask the political parties opposing these laws today who promised these reforms in their election manifestos in the past.
Protesters marched in Indonesia's capital on Friday to demand the release of a firebrand cleric and justice for 6 of his followers who were killed in a shootout with police. Police officers detained Rizik Shihab, leader of the Islam Defenders Front, who turned himself into authorities last weekend, a day after police warned they would arrest him after he ignored several summons. Shihab was accused of inciting people to breach pandemic restrictions and ignoring measures to curb the spread of COVID-19 by holding an event to commemorate Prophet Muhammad's birthday and the wedding of his daughter last month that pulled in thousands of his supporters. Police said Shihab could face up to 6 years in prison if found guilty of inciting people to violate health regulations amid an outbreak and of obstructing law enforcement. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari on Friday said the government would keep on trying to keep students across the country safe after more than 300 schoolboys abducted by Boko Haram were released by their captors.
We thank God that the law enforcement agencies, in this case especially the military, the army, and the governor worked extremely hard. And as soon as they got them, the governor rang me and informed me, and I congratulated him and the army that organized the operation. And so their efforts is not good enough for me. Our responsibility, I said, is to secure this country for all the citizens to do their businesses without any problem. We haven't achieved that yet, but we'll keep on trying. Well, we are doing our best. Remember when we closed the borders, we found out that still somehow the terrorists or the abductors still get weapons and ammunition. They still take people hostages. They are collecting millions of naira. We have a lot of work ahead of us.
Every December 18th, the United Nations celebrates International Migrants Day to raise awareness about the challenges faced and the contributions made by the world's estimated 272 million migrants. This year's theme is reimagining human mobility to highlight the important role of migrants who contribute their knowledge, networks and skills to build stronger, more resilient communities. This year, migrants have been at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19, working in health, transportation and food services to help people no matter what. However, they frequently find themselves living on the margins of society and have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19 through job losses, evictions and discrimination. Millions of migrants are stranded, often without income or shelter, unable to return home due to COVID-19 mobility restrictions, and they also face increased risks of trafficking and exploitation. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.